Good morning. Today we are talking about how do we help our kids figure out what they want to do when they grow up. This is Back Talk. I'm your host, Melissa Corkum, parent, coach, and owner at thecorkboardonline.com. And today I have with me Dr. Shawn Hales, psychologist and owner of Clarity Centers. So Shawn, thank you so much for being here today.
You're very welcome. It's a real honor to come up and talk with you here.
So, you know, it's kind of like the age-old question. Whenever we talk to kids, we ask them like, so what do you want to be when you grow up?
Absolutely.
And it's a loaded question, and it's kind of cute, right? When kids are little and we hear things like, you know, firefighter, a nurse, you know, teacher, whatever. But it's a for real question.
It sure is.
And it's a big deal. So talk about some of the challenges around like answering that question for real, specifically for young people today in our culture.
Absolutely.
What are some of the challenges that they're facing?
Well, and there are a lot of challenges that are happening even generationally. Like when you and I were growing up, the kind of expectations that we have on kids are different. I was looking at a couple of numbers before coming in this morning, and it's really kind of shocking the ways that kids in this age, 18 years old, 19, 20, are not necessarily launching out. And that's one of the reasons I do what I do, is to kind of help people launch their kids out. For example, monetarily, parents are supporting their kids a lot longer than probably when you and I were growing up. Some numbers like almost 80% of all parents right now are contributing to the finances of their young adults from 18 to 30.
Wow.
So most parents are actually doing that for their kids instead of as they're trying to figure out who they're going to be. So it just doesn't start at 12 years old and keep questioning. Sometimes kids are still in their 20s and figuring it out.
Right. Well, there's this misnomer, right, that at like 18,
right,
you graduate from high school and you go off to college. Like there's this traditional progression, and we're not seeing that quite as much anymore. And do you think it's a cultural shift, or is it an economic thing? I mean, like houses are ridiculously expensive. You used to be able to like get out of college, right, and like buy your starter home, and that has kind of changed.
Well, and even from my generation, my own father, 17 and 18-year-old was already saving money for the eventual house that he and my mom, moved into, and they were able to save money in coffee cans and buy a house, right? Like, oh, okay, we've got 5 coffee cans of quarters and dollar bills, and they were able to afford that.
Yeah, it was a down payment.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's just not true. I mean, you could definitely get deep in the weeds of the finances of apartments, and but most of the time, the incomes that students are seeing in their first jobs, the minimum wages that are out there, $7, $8 federally, are in no way possible for people to afford most apartments in different regions of the United States. So there is a financial issue here with students not being able to kind of leave the home when they don't have the money.
Well, and I find we have a 14-year-old daughter who really wanted to get a job.
Right.
She had been babysitting, so that's an easy thing. She was finding that pretty easily, but she wanted to kind of get like a real job. And so, you know what, it is hard now, and legally you can work at 14. In our state, you can get a work permit. She could not find someone to hire her at 14. So I think even this idea that we can start saving money, I mean, I had a job at 14.
Right.
You could be mowing lawns at 8 or 9, right, a bajillion years ago. And so you start saving even a couple years later than you were. I think a lot of kids are involved in sports and extracurriculars, and maybe less young people are getting jobs at 14, 15, and 16.
I see that. I see in some of my part of my business is a private practice of counseling, psychotherapy, in addition to career stuff. And I see that happen a lot. You've got a 19-year-old, 20-year-old who's in college, but they don't use their phone. They don't want to apply for a job because they don't necessarily have those soft skills of presenting themselves, knowing how to start a conversation, keep a conversation going. It's terrifying to a lot of college-age students, and so they're not really prepared. And truthfully, I think some of this is background. Like, I'm not sure parents are doing what they need to do to prepare their kids to be independent, functioning adults. Like, you even hear of some of the terms in the popular media, like helicopter parents, right? The idea that a helicopter kind of hovers everywhere over a kid, so if little Johnny's in a soccer team Mom or dad are there to kind of make sure he plays 10 minutes each game and gets encouraged. And those parents can get into fights with the coaches over what the kid didn't get. And that same kind of parenting, though, doesn't contribute to independent, figuring things out on your own. So that same kid who's 18 or 19 now, and they've got their first job and they feel sick, well, they call mom to call the boss, and say, little Johnny can't come in today. Well, that's not an effective way to raise a kid, even though the mom or the dad would justify and say, hey, I'm just trying to help my kid. I want them to have the best opportunities anyone could ever have.
Yeah.
But I think it's misguided.
Yeah, we talk a lot about like high structure and high nurture and how our kids need both. They do sometimes need our help, but we also don't want to overhelp, because then we're kind of enabling, we're not giving them what they need to kind of grow.
Right.
So, there's this economic piece where like legitimately it may be almost impossible to earn enough money to kind of go where you need to be and launch where you need to be. And so you have this financial contribution that parents are making to their kids. And sometimes that's needed. I mean, we have had that situation 2 times over in my family where we've had young adults back.
Right.
And it's been good. And I wouldn't undo that because I think the family support, it was the next stepping pad to launching.
Right.
But what would you say to parents? Like, how do you create boundaries around that so that it's helpful and not hurtful?
Well, I can think about my own story in terms of career and job, but even for my own children, we kind of instilled in them, we kind of started in their early teens in saying, hey, we're blessed enough financially to let you go and have these educational opportunities in high school and so forth, in private institutions and things like that, but you guys are responsible for college. And I remember when they were younger, they were like, what? What do you mean? And as they got older, 16 or 17, my wife and I would reiterate, you guys are responsible for college. Well, then they began to think, wait, that wasn't a joke? I'm like, no, we've prepared you to get out there in the world, and we want you to own this. We want you to feel confident, and like, I did this. And I would start to kind of tell them stories of my own experience of trying to figure things out. And when I was in college, I had a part-time job on campus, and there were times that I was using my gas card, to buy hot dogs because I'd run out of money for a few weeks before the next pay came in. And so we started to instill stories of competency. You can do this, you can figure this out. There are plenty of ways to get through life, and you've got to find your own path. And so I have a son now, his second year of college, and I was really surprised this second year how independent he was in getting everything done. And there were times when I would say to him, have you filled out the financial aid form? Have you done the loan that you're going to get or whatever? I would wake up at 3 a.m. thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if he doesn't do it? But he did it. He didn't even feel like he needed to tell me. And so I'm not trying to brag that that's the perfect way to do it, but that was one of the things I did, is started in their teen years to help them know we believe in you, and part of believing in you means you're going to have to make some of these tough decisions.
Yeah. Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking, I talk to a lot of parents who do some of that helicopter parenting early on, and maybe even do it for as long as their child is with them, right? But then all of a sudden they want them to adult. And so there's this it's not a transition, right? It's like, I'm doing everything for you, I'm hovering, I'm helping you get your job, but all of a sudden, like, I don't want you in my house. And so now it's like, be the adult, go do all the things, pay for college. So we're gonna take a little break right now, but when we come back, we're going to talk about, some of the practical things that we can do to transition so that it's not just this like cold break from like, you're living at home and I'm doing all the things, to like, oh, and now you're an adult, so you go do all the things. And then also some of the practical things that you offer in your practice and that we can do at home with our kids to help guide them to, do you want to be a doctor or do you want to be a chef? Those types of things. So
you bet.
We'll take a little break and we'll be back.
Thanks.
Shelter dogs aren't broken. They've simply experienced more life. If they were human, we would call them wise. They would be the ones with tales to tell and stories to write, the ones dealt a bad hand who responded with courage. Do not pity a shelter dog. Adopt one.
Say we've got grit, and we'll take it as a compliment. Because it's our uncommon drive, our spark within, that brings us together and sets us apart. We are temple made. And when others take shortcuts, when others take breaks, when others take the easy way, we take charge.
Add us on social media to watch bloopers, behind-the-scenes footage, previews, and more.
I work 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. So when I'm off the clock, I gotta get stuff done. So when I need a snack, I need something healthy, tasty, and easy to eat. Like wonderful pistachios without the shells. They're protein-powered, delicious, and great on the go. And that's perfect for me. Thanks, Liz. A woman without a lot of time.
Whether you're a gourmet cook or just want to eat like one, visit Rostelli Market Fresh, your home for the freshest, locally sourced ingredients to please everyone who loves great food. Our organic meats.
Welcome back. So, Shawn, as we're raising, especially I'm thinking like teenagers, right? Mm-hmm. We're at that time when they're starting to feel their independence. We know that they're going to start looking to either go away to college or get a job or move out. Some of them can't wait to get out of our houses.
And we can't wait for them to get out.
I know, sometimes too, right? So what are some of the things that we can do or that you have done that you talk to parents about in your practice or you've done with your own teens as they're kind of, because they're like mini adults in some ways. Like what are some of the things that we can start like letting go of control over?
Well, and actually this is a super important question. I was talking earlier about the finances of all this, or raising kids and the amount of money that we're doing to support our kids as they're aging. There's even some numbers about retirement. In the United States, we call these kids boomerangs, right? They go out when they're 18 or 19, we think they're completely, a weapon to the world, and then they circle back around and land in our laps. There's a term in the UK apparently called kippers, which is kids in parents' pockets eroding retirement savings. That's a pretty good word, kippers. And it's a big problem because some of the numbers, about $500 billion is spent on this age group by parents, which is actually twice as much money as parents are using to put their own retirement savings away. So there's a huge controversy.
Yeah, so in like 30 years, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, parents are not taking care of themselves. And that is a big problem. So you could probably, if you really thought about it, you probably know someone who's paying their kid's cell phone, or maybe paid for the wedding, or occasionally helping with apartment, even if they're not living in your home. So it's a big controversy. So we do not want that to happen. I don't want that to happen for myself. I want my kids to be in a place where they can make their own decisions. So over the years, I came out of graduate school as a psychologist, and a lot of what we psychologists do or counselors do to help people with career are things called interest inventories, this kind of test that look at someone's interests in life and kind of matches them with other people in that same career. I call it the cocktail party test because it's almost as if you like these things in life and lawyers like those things in life. So if you are like the lawyers and you could talk to them in a cocktail party, maybe that career would be good for you, which I guess is a good model.
Like speed dating for careers,
right? Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. It's something, to help people. But about a decade ago, I got some training in this particular type of test that looks at abilities and talents. And long story short, it was out of some research that the federal government did in World War I and World War II to identify the recruits, who is, quote, smart enough and skilled enough to be a gunnery soldier or who could be a mechanic. And so some private agencies, private groups kind of came in and took that same research and developed it more into the civil career. And I had to take the test myself when I first was learning about it.
So are you in the right career?
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, yes, that turned out well. But there were surprising things that I kind of looked at my own report and thought, oh my gosh. Like, for example, architect. That was one of the things that was possible for me given my talents and abilities. And it enabled me to look back through my life and go, gosh, you know, when I was a kid, I loved building forts. And my dad did some things around the house, and I always enjoyed kind of thinking, Dad, why don't you put it there? Or could we put the door here, you know? And, but I never got the encouragement or didn't have anybody that I knew in my life who was an architect, so that didn't seem possible. And truthfully, that's a lot of what happens in my work, is doing some testing to help identify these things, and then letting people dream a little bit, like what's possible, what's practical, what can I do? At that point, I wasn't going to go back to architectural school, right? But I think if I had been 20, maybe, and that was a possibility, I might have thought, is that worthwhile for me? So these kinds of assessments can do that. So unlike the traditional counseling role where a survey or a test is about your interest and you're rating yourself, you know, a little bit to a lot,
Yeah.
These abilities assessments actually, it's a 2.5, 3 hour test you take online, and it actually measures things that you're doing, and like mechanical reasoning, pitch discrimination, logic, music, and so it puts it all together in a way that people that can then consume it and think, okay, these are the careers, list of careers that, based upon my talents, I could match with.
What I like about what you're saying is this test covers a lot of things, like you were talking about pitch discrimination. So we're not just talking about typical, like, am I smart? Because I think that's the other thing, right? We're seeing a lot of kids with learning differences and self-esteem issues because school has gotten very boxy, for lack of a better word, right? There's a very cookie cutter way that we're looking for students to show up. We're using a lot of standardized testing that tests a lot of very pure academic skills. And so a lot of kids are coming out thinking, I don't like school, or I'm not good at it, or I'm not smart. And so an assessment like this can really tease out some things, talents and abilities that you're talking about that maybe a teacher or, you know, nightly homework hasn't quite let us know about.
Right, because it's not academic. It's not, these assessments aren't about, you know, can you add quickly, or do you know how to write a sentence, or, you know, can you use literature or whatever. They're really very practical, and a few years ago they made it even more practical to kind of connect with the more common websites. And a good tip for you guys out there, if you don't even know anything and you don't want to do assessments with me or someone else, there's a website called ONET. I'm forgetting if it's onetcenter.com or ONET, O-N-E-T. It's a conglomeration of all this government research. You can find out certain careers, you can learn about them, what the education is required to prepare for that career, and a really fun little trick is you can actually find out the salaries for those careers. So you could, as a parent, or hopefully someone out there that's a student, you can go on these kinds of sites and figure out, okay, if I wanted to be an architect and I live in New Jersey, what will I make? And it actually can drill down enough to that. And so my assessments kind of connect back with that so people can figure out exactly what makes sense for them at that time in their life.
Cool, I'm going to remember that. So what, at what age do you recommend doing this type of assessment and thinking about this as a family with your kids?
Right, I think it's funny, my daughter who's younger, like I had told her, I hadn't forgotten to I had told her this, but I told her at one point, oh, well, when you're a certain age, you're gonna be able to take this test. Well, when that age came, she was like, okay, Dad, when can I get it? You know, she wanted to go for it. So it's actually as young as 16, but usually I see people in my office that are either in that first stage where they're in college and they're totally freaked out, they don't know what they wanna do, they don't know what their major is. And by the way, I don't think high schools prepare students very well at all. Or another set of people might come see me when they're in their 30s or even 40s and they're unhappy with their career.
They're having like their midlife crisis.
Exactly. They're like, okay, I have this much money, I want to go back to college, what should I do? And there are really some students who are very much able to take what I can do. They take the report home, they figure it out, and I don't see them again. And then there are some people that really need a bit more coaching. Because some of this is about confidence. Who am I? Can I do this? Is this possible? How do I interview? How do I put together a resume? Some of these things never get really talked about. So parents could really help, I think, their students by exposing them to their own careers, by saying, this is how I got it. This is how many times I had to interview in order to get where I am. Maybe even being a little risky and saying, hey, this is how much I make, or this is how much what people in my career tend to make. Some practical things, students.
Or another great question, this is how often I failed.
Right
before I got there. This is how many careers I tried out.
I love
This is how many interviews I didn't get callbacks on.
Right, that's perfect, because truthfully the numbers do say that people every 4 to 5 years, people are either switching completely in a career, or they're moving in some way or transitioning some way in an existing career. I can even say that for myself. I've always been a therapist, but there was a time in my life where I decided to do research for about 4 or 5 years, and then realized now I really enjoy being a psychologist and meeting with people. So that's a great idea. Kids don't always need to see us succeed in everything. They need to see us fail and recover, right? Make a mistake, apologize, dust yourself off, and move on. And that's where the lessons are, I think, and that can start as early as teenage years to help your young student need to know that.
Yeah, and I think the other hidden lesson in here is every 4 to 5 years, right? So the decisions that we're making, our college major, well, I'm not using my college major at all, and practically. I mean, it comes out right in the unspoken things, right? I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and here I am.
I don't think I even knew that.
Right, and here I am, parent coaching, doing all these other kind of people things. So it's not the end of the world, right? But if we go to college and we pick a major and then we ended up, deciding that we want to do something different, it's okay. If we get 5 years into a career and we want to switch, people do that. So I think that takes some of the pressure off of this, like, what do I want to do? I think a lot of times we feel like I felt like this way in college. I was picking my major. I was literally picking the rest of my life. And it's not really true.
Right.
So along with that, what are the conversations that aren't being had in schools that we can have at home that do, like what you said, like we're not preparing our kids to figure out what their major should be or think in these ways. So short of a formal assessment, what are the types of questions, what are the conversations, dialogues we should be having with our adolescents and our teens about these things? What can we be pointing out? What can we ask them to think about?
I think I never underestimate the power of social connections and experiences where people can learn about others, diverse cultures. I was reflecting on how much in my own neighborhood when I was growing up, how many different types of people were in their neighborhood. I was kind of lower middle class, but like 4 houses down, there was an attorney in my town that was well known, and there was a real estate developer a few houses away. There were nurses, there were teachers. And so I really had the privilege of being able to be around all kinds of different people, and I talked with them. I was at their kitchen tables interacting with my age peers. And so even though it's a lot of fun to let your kid enjoy their life and play video games all day or text Instagram, that's some valuable things. Getting your kids out there to be involved in the community, to get to know other people, inviting other people over to have conversations. I'm always struck with my own children's friends, with the fewer number of kids that actually talk to me as a parent. Hey, Mr. Hales, what do you do? What's going on? Or thank you so much for letting us come over and start a fire in the fireplace. And that's a really a very important skill that isn't really encouraged much by parents. So being a part of a community group, a church, a synagogue, volunteering, getting kids out there so they can interact with the world of work before they actually have to be out there working.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because if we think about it, our kids go to school and they're kind of laned in with kids that are exactly their same age, unless you're in an atypical school, right? Yeah. Like socialization is about how do we get along with your classmates, like the people who were born exactly 3 months before you to anywhere, 6 months after you. Everyone's been, September to September of the same year. And we are with, other than, a teacher, maybe one teacher, or, if you're in high school, 6 or 7 teachers, but, and and then we play club sports with kids, you know,
All are the
U18,
same age.
U16, right? We're all
Right,
the same
right.
age. And so I think culturally there's been this shift, unless you are involved in a community group like a church or a synagogue or, you know, there isn't this intergenerational piece. We're not living as close to our grandparents as we used to be.
Right.
So we're losing exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
So it's
Yep.
interesting to think about the impact of that.
Right, and to even prepare kids, because there may be a 16 or a 17-year-old out there right now who doesn't even know that someday they'll have to pay from their own pocket a place to live, right? I know that seems kind of silly, but if they don't know about your own finances as a family, why would they think they have to do anything? They may not understand, you know, that cell phone bills come every month, and sometimes you have to figure out, oh, I need this service or that service, or budgeting. So real life stuff I think is a good way to teach kids. I dealt with this as well with my son, who was going off to college, and he really didn't know how to cook. And this summer when he was home, we were like, okay, we're going to the grocery store and we're going to buy different things. Now I cook, my wife cooks, so you would think that they would just pick up on that. The same way with career things, you know, and thinking through interviews or asking for salary. You know, so often people get scared and anxious through that process, and so I've coached people at times through how to stand your ground and ask for what your worth is, and not everybody has exposure to that or has thought that through, and they find themselves in the moment and they don't know what to do.
Yeah, well, it's like good negotiating skills,
Right.
and that's a scary thing to think
is.
about teaching your kids, right? Because we want them to just toe the line.
Yeah.
We want to tell them what to do and have them do it, and that serves us well, especially for younger kids, and we need that, and there's safety involved, and I get all of that.
Right.
But in the real world, we negotiate a lot. We negotiate deadlines at work. We negotiate salaries. We make compromises with our spouse. And so if we're not teaching those skills to our kids at a very young age, again, it's like boom, all of a sudden you're at the negotiating table for a job, and you're like, well, I've always just done the thing. I don't
Right.
know how to, you know, verbalize my needs and ask questions and dig. So as parents, we do have to kind of step out into the like danger zone a little bit and allow
Right.
our kids to ask for compromises and, you know, learn appropriate and respectful negotiating skills with
Absolutely.
ourselves.
Absolutely. And actually, one of the things that happens often with that 17-year-old, especially, or that 18-year-old, is you'll notice in your household things will start to get a lot more contentious, because developmentally they're preparing to get out of there.
Yeah.
Right?
Or like 11 at my house.
And so, yeah. We'll talk later about that. But but that's important, to actually have good arguments with your kids. You know, to not, have this blow up and then they go to their corner and you go to their corner. Now, I'm not suggesting you keep fighting when you need to calm down. You can have calm arguments. But to be able to negotiate that too, it's like, well, you know, you're wanting to stay out till 1 a.m. and while we trust you, we don't trust everybody around you, we don't trust people on the road, and you're freaking loud when you come in the house, right? So be respectful of everyone. So if you don't do that, if you're like, now, you know, if you just are quietly disappointed, but you don't voice as a parent what your expectations are and what your boundaries are, then kids don't actually learn that either.
Yeah.
So they do go to their room and they turn on the video and that's it. And you don't interact much. And all of that is important for a career.
Yeah, really good coping skills. So Shawn, how do people find you? Because this test can be taken online, and even if they're not local to your office,
That's right.
you can certainly still help young people do the assessment and coach
Right.
them through kind of some of those results. Even, you know, that's the beauty of technology and all the
it's been
things. So
great.
how can people connect with you and find out more about that?
So you've seen there kind of on the screen my Clarity Centers, and the website that I have for my counseling practice is claritycenters.com. But the coaching practice is claritycenters.coach. So you can reach me a couple of different ways. I also have a Facebook group called Wired to Make a Difference. And that's a great place for people to ask questions and to learn a little bit about the career field and a bit more. There's some videos on there about the tests that I use, Wired to Make a Difference, or claritycenters.coach.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing. I'm taking notes because my kids are starting to get into these spaces. I have a 16-year-old that's starting to think about the college major and all those things, so we may be knocking on your door.
I'll help you out,
So
Melissa.
thank you so much for being with us.
You bet. Thanks for letting me come.